Last Wednesday, the House gave final approval to Pandemic Stimulus Bill 3.0. That brings total stimulus spending approved during the pandemic to $5 trillion. The United States is printing money at breakneck speed to survive, to eat, and to wage wars. A big Ponzi scheme between the Federal Reserve, Treasury Department, and Wallstreet. More money for war, more money for Wallstreet. Biggest Ponzi scheme in the history of mankind. The only thing that is keeping this house of cards from imploding is zero interest rates and QE eternity. A $2 trillion infrastructure package. Where only $100 billion actually goes to infrastructure. The rest goes to the cons in Congress, state politicians, and all their good buddies in industry. Enough pork in the bill to keep the nation in bacon for 1,000 years. It's almost like they're trying to destroy what's left of the US dollar. The stimulus package is to pay the banks through the back door, not help out the people. Their only way to fix the ballooning debt is to crash the dollar and go back to the trade system. The owners of the Federal Reserve will soon own everything and convince you that you are happy. At this point, it's like cancer nearing its final stage. There is no vaccine to protect us from the coming inflationary depression. Just say bye-bye to the US dollar. The market loves that free money coming in the so-called COVID bill. Markets have become too dependent on stimulus to survive. It is called inflating a bubble. This is what Rome did before it collapsed. Bond yields rising means interest rates are rising because the government is borrowing more money and doesn't have a plan to reopen. Meaning people going back to work and paying taxes is in the air and the loan is at a higher risk. Also, the two biggest industries here, homes and cars, are directly affected by interest rates. Let's see what happens by the end of the year. The US dollar is in its final days. We are running a massive deficit. The federal government's budget deficit widened to $311 billion in February from $235 billion in the same month last year, the Treasury Department reported Wednesday. Economists surveyed by the Wall Street Journal had expected the deficit to widen to $255 billion in February. The deficit is a record for the month. Total spending was $559 billion in February, up 32% from the prior year. For the fiscal year to date, the budget deficit swelled to $1 trillion compared with $624 billion over the same period a year ago. The U.S. is set to run $3 trillion deficits for 2 years in a row. The government continues a spending spree, with Congress passing the $1.9 trillion COVID relief package on Wednesday. After that, the Biden administration is expected to soon announce a Build Back Better infrastructure and green energy measure that could cost between $1 to $3 trillion. It used to take us years to borrow $1 trillion. Now we're borrowing that much in just 5 months. Biden's American Rescue Plan includes new stimulus payments, unemployment spending, and funds for the vaccinations, but it will add significantly to the U.S. debt. The growth of the U.S. debt spending is projected to exceed $78 trillion in 2028. The U.S. economy will implode with the rate of debt like this. It is a matter of time before this country implodes into bankruptcy. Everyone seems to think massive debt is meaningless. Until one day, the economy collapses Zimbabwe style, and they're affected personally in the worst way. They will keep on kicking the can, as long as possible, or until the payment on the debt will exceed the budgets of DoD, Medicare, and Social Security. The guardrails have truly been removed. There is only the desire to spend, borrow and print money. Digital money will change that even more. If they find a limit, the government doesn't just meet that need, it smashes through it. We used to have these limits in place, but because of the pandemic, they are spending with an excuse. But when the pendulum swings the other way, the Republicans will have to get an even bigger stimulus because who will ever try to do a billion-dollar plan when trillion-dollar deals are now the norm? The USA never intends to pay the debt. A mother of all wars is what they are planning for. The only way to default. This societal experiment known as America is about over, regardless of what they are telling you. The Great Reset means the collapse of the U.S. empire. Welcome back to the Atlantis Report. You are here for your daily dose of the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Please take a second to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and don't forget to also hit the notification bell. This stimuli isn't going to help the economy, it will provide a short boost and a long-term drag on the economy, as does all debt. This is to get votes, sheer numbers. You chose to be wise with your money, time, and education, so your reward is nothing. You cannot sway the educated like the masses. The government takes away people's main wealth-building tool. Their income. Replaces it with crumbs to make them come back for more crumbs. When government fears the people, there is liberty. When the people fear the government, there is tyranny. Thomas Jefferson. Our moronic leaders are spending like drunken sailors because they want to destroy the economy. They want to enslave the American people, and what better way to get their cooperation than to impoverish them and then say we're here to help. But before we do, you must do as we say. Then they've got us right where they want us. This fraudulent, oppressive system that we live under is discouraging, and I have no idea when it will end. How did we get to where we are at? If our political class doesn't fear and respect us, they don't work for us. A little over a year ago, when the repo market failed, and the Fed stepped in and ramped up asset purchases, I said get the heck out of cash because the Fed just crossed the Rubicon, and they are never going back. I said buy the S&P 500 index, buy desirable real estate, and most importantly, buy some gold. We now have QE eternity and direct payments to people. It may take a decade or more before getting a spectacular crash up assets to the moon, dollar to the basement. This is not a drill. Now don't go plow it all in at once. Keep calm and build up your investments in assets over time. It is easier that way. The pandemic was a great opportunity that just happened to come along at the right time. Some other calamity will happen, and you'll have a great opportunity again. Meantime, a little this week, a little next week, and so on. If the Fed still measured inflation as they did in 1980, it would look way worse than today's charts. There is an awful cost of doing nothing. Enough people believe the Fed is all-powerful and can backstop any market. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy for a while, as private investors jump in to buy. But the Fed wasn't able to stop the collapse in February and March of 2020, and at this point, it is out of tools, no matter the protestations of Powell. What will it do for the next collapse? The people that wrote the Constitution never anticipated what has happened since World War II. The corporations would never have been allowed to exist if they had anticipated things today. If you study the EPA, you will find confusion of law as everyone and his brother at one point in time written law to govern the environment. It would take 10 truckloads of documentation to even begin to see what kind of giant it has become. Much of which conflicts with other law that has been written. What that means is the EPA has the ability to pick and choose which laws it actually operates under. Or we declare the entire mess as unconstitutional and start over. I do not see that happening anytime soon with the current representatives in Congress. That is just one agency. The IRS is in a situation also. IRS law is likely so complicated that it might take a good portion of one's life to even understand it. Then you have interpretation as given by the courts. What law has been ruled unconstitutional? Through all of this, you have regulation of the law and at least 100 regulations written every day for at least the last 25 years by every bureau in DC. It basically is ruled by confusion. The finance of the government is ruled by pork put on bills in order to get necessary rules in place for the government to even be able to run. Unless someone figures out how to cut the pork, it will continue to grow like the monster it is. The current stimulus package is a good example of pork gone wild. What is going to happen is the entire structure will collapse from its own weight of bad legal decisions in the next couple of years. The currency pyramid scheme of created debts is the banking cartel's source of power and their greatest weakness. Contrary to the popular belief of a misguided public, the money in use today isn't a sound receptacle of value, storing trust, integrity, and honor for the future. It doesn't resist inflation, deflation, war, famine, and plague. It isn't a stable foundation upon which a prosperous and equitable economy can be built. It doesn't inspire confidence, like having your transactions guaranteed by a pair of kneeling bishops, and it isn't blessed with a constitution that's harder than Jacob's pillow. The unvarnished truth is, this modern currency is a disease, the effects of which infect society with an illness that robs the nation of its reason and any sense of responsibility. Free markets using sound money and open to price discovery have been usurped by rigged markets of pyramid scheme capitalism, fueled by unlimited created debts and currency debasement. When the victims of this system, the people and the planet, reach their limit of price and pollution, the deflationary sinkholes are plugged with the unlimited resources that protect the asset prices upon which the entire fraud is based. Uncapped pyramid scheme capitalism leads inevitability to an elite syndicate in a Faustian pact owning all the assets in an open-air, nation-state, debtor's prison. Today, the government openly exhibits unlimited resources to bail out banks but limited resources for its inmates. Budget deficits and the national debt are free to create but are maintained by increased taxation. Unrestrained pyramid scheme capitalism, high on created debts and currency debasement, has ended boom and bust, not with stable prices and a sustainable future, but an unhinged asset price binge. Unable to make an honest profit, the country has resorted to exploiting the misery of others and the future. A nation corrupted by design that now places greed before honor and collaborates with its own demise. The Federal Reserve imposes interest rates as low as 0% for the corporations who want to borrow money from the government. They don't have any procedures to follow. The Federal Reserve just gives it to them. Why? The corporation gives the government political campaigns, so one hand washes the other. All this borrowing, pumping money into the system, causing a hike in debt.